Now, before the break, I spoke to the self-proclaimed acting national chairman of the Labour Party. Join me now for a legal perspective on the opposition party's crisis is lawyer and Arise analyst Frank Tietie. Good to have you.
Thank you.
On Newsnight tonight. I wonder how much of the goings-on within the Labour Party you've been following. Just spoke with the self-proclaimed national chairman in the person of Lamidi Apapa, and he's saying he's relying on Article 14 2AB of the party constitution, that's the Labour Party constitution. And just, just to give it some perspective, this section actually says 2A. It says the deputy national chairman shall assist the national chairman in the discharge of his duties. B, a deputy national chairman shall act in the absence of the national chairman and shall, in the absence of the national chairman, preside over the meetings of the party. That's the section that Mr. Lamidi Apapa is relying on.
Well, if the presumption is that the tenure of Julius Abure has expired when he was national chairman,
Right.
What normally follows is that the tenure of the deputy national chairman also have expired. So in that case, it's difficult to understand where the respected Chief Lamidi Apapa derives his authority from, because there is no doubt that there is a vacuum in the Labour Party, in the leadership of the Labour Party. The question is, what should be done?
Right.
I think the set of people who have approached INEC with a decision of the Supreme Court, that set of persons appears to be on the right path. However, does not mean that they are entitled to be so declared. Because you look at the Labour Party, does it make provision for a sort of caretaker committee leadership? Of course, it has a crisis now. So if there is an interregnum between the time of the expiration of Julius Abure's tenure and the time with which it ought to have held a convention to produce new leaders,
yes.
Well, if there is a problem with regards to that, and the Supreme Court has advisedly directed that they should, resolve the matters according to their constitution, then one institution becomes very important.
Which is? Which is
the Independent National Electoral Commission. That's why I commend those who have approached the INEC headquarters to present the Supreme Court judgment. However, the powers of INEC, must be looked into. Section 83, and I think this is something that we must invoke. Section 83 of the Electoral Act, together with the provisions of the third schedule of the Constitution that establishes INEC and defines its powers, empowers INEC to be able to monitor the activities of political parties and to that extent demand for every piece of information from the leaders of such a political party.
Right.
Again, every political party deposits with INEC its constitution. So at this stage, INEC is able to use its powers under the Electoral Act and the Constitution in monitoring that Labour Party to get to a point where there should be a legitimate convention to produce its leaders. At this stage, it's difficult to take side. Whether, of course, Julius Abure appears to be clearly on the losing side, given the recent revelations that have come after the CTC of the Supreme Court judgment was made available.
Yes.
However, can Senator Nadi Usman claim to be the leader of the Labour Party as a result of being a sort of caretaker committee chairman? Where did she derive that kind of power from? Who conveyed a certain neck? It ought to have been...
Not even when critical stakeholders of the party say, look, we want to set up a caretaker committee to resolve in the interim the issues plaguing the party.
If they proceed on that kind of argument, they're simply validating Lamidi Apapa's argument. Lamidi Apapa's argument is weakened by the fact that Julius Abure was not sacked, as a result of the fact that he lived out, he expired his tenure. His tenure expired. And as such, the Lamidi Apapa's tenure also expired. So you don't really have an executive of the national executive of the Labour Party in place. There is clearly a vacuum. At this stage, the proper thing should be done. There should be a national convention to actually select the new leaders of the Labour Party. But who will midwife?
Who will midwife that convention?
Again, so look at the problem. So if Abure did not do so as a result of maybe selfish consideration, ambition, I would say. Right. But again, INEC must not shy away from it. The fact that it's independent also makes it very impartial. In its impartiality, it has responsibilities under Section 83 of the Electoral Act.
So what you're saying is the INEC, the electoral umpire, is the final, or should be, the final arbiter in this case. That is not the court.
Yes, that is what the court is not saying, but that is what it's also saying. Because when the court does not say a thing, listen to it very well, you will hear what it's not saying. What it's not saying is that, where is your constitution? Where is the repository of your constitution? Right. INEC. If I mean, look, anybody can show you any piece of document and say it is the constitution of the Labour Party, except the constitution that is deposited with INEC. Now, there's a Supreme Court judgment that has said, abide by the constitution. INEC only needs to recognize a certain a group of persons as leaders of the Labour Party, and that settles it. So INEC at this time must exercise that responsibility under Section 83 of the Electoral Act.
Is there any role for the courts at this point? Because it has gotten up to the highest court in the land, and still you have this tussle. Should it still go back to the court?
It cannot go back to the court. You see, the Supreme Court, stopped short of reprimanding the two lower courts, that is the court of the court of first instance and the court of appeal. For proceeding to take any side whatsoever when it knew that it did not have jurisdiction. I think there is some wisdom. The Supreme Court is being attacked left, right, and center that it is running away from its core responsibility of resolving disputes. Nevertheless, it is also, as a policy court, it is now telling us that where there is, because if you look at the Labour Party constitution, it states that the supremacy of the Labour Party constitution on all matters affecting the Labour Party. Yeah. Now, if we have an umpire that has the ability, that has the powers to monitor and give directives to political parties, constitutional and statutory powers, which is INEC, it must resolve this matter. At this point, we should be looking at.
Before INEC will not be going beyond its.
It will not, because INEC will have to look. And that's why we cannot shy away from commending those who have recognize the role of INEC by approaching INEC. But does not mean that INEC should in any way give them any preference. INEC must now realize that, see, you cannot build, something on nothing. In that case, the Senator Ninadi Usman's emergence must be based on something that is legal in accordance with the constitution of the Labour Party. Now, Lamidi Apapa does not have any ground, because whatever has affected Julius Abure has affected him. In that case,
is he aware of that?
Would INEC now recognize Senator Ninadi Usman because the Supreme Court said to have resolved a number of issues in her favor? Not quite. At this point, there should be a proper directive to the Labour Party that abide by the constitution, by your constitution, by the Labour Party constitution. A national convention ought to.
Who will give that directive? Is it INEC or
I think that INEC can give. I think in this case, in subjective terms, I think INEC can give a directive on how a national convention can be held in this case. INEC must live up to its responsibilities.
We'll see if INEC will step up to the plate. Frank Tietie, lawyer and a Rise analyst, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
As always.